Hey folks, welcome to Harmony with Hunter. My name is Michael Hunter, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about mental health for musicians, specifically as it relates to COVID-19 and how we've been dealing with the pandemic. I was not originally going to do this video this week. I had another video planned where I was going to talk about life on Broadway and playing on the band's visit and Tootsie, but over the past week I had some personal experiences that led me to believe that this is a video that I should put out sooner rather than later, which I'll go into more detail about later in the video. So yeah, let's get started. So why am I making this video? Obviously mental health is kind of down across the board and there's a lot of issues plaguing our society right now. Why am I choosing to talk about musicians and mental health issues? Well, there's two reasons. The first reason is that I'm a musician with mental health issues. And I'm a firm believer that you should talk about things you know about and that you have some perspective on, which I do. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that I'm concerned that musicians are particularly vulnerable to mental health issues right now. That's something that I wanted to focus in on and that I think not enough people are talking about, so I'm choosing to talk about it. So what are some of the challenges facing musicians in the age of COVID? Well, the first obvious one is that we're mostly unemployed. Obviously, when the ability to play live shows disappeared, for many of us that stole a major source of our income, if not all of it. We've been able to replace some of that with Zoom lessons and home studio recording for those of us that can afford it and set it up. But either way, it's still a huge financial stress for the vast majority of musicians. Additionally, our industry is likely to be one of the last to come back because our industry relies on packing large numbers of people into indoor spaces. It's kind of hard to get around that. Another problem facing us is that we didn't just lose our jobs, we lost a sizable chunk of our identity. I don't just consider myself a musician by trade, I consider myself a musician as a person. It's a large part of my identity. It's what I've spent most of my life pursuing and perfecting. I've sacrificed hobbies, friendships, relationships, mental health, physical health, and I can't do the thing that I made all those sacrifices for, which is really difficult. Another problem is that musicians, many of us already had mental health issues before the pandemic. I've always suspected that musicians had a higher incidence of mental illness. As it turns out, there are multiple studies that show that it's significantly higher. Somewhere in the realm of 50 to 75% of musicians report symptoms of depression. And that was before the pandemic. So obviously that has been amplified ever since. Another problem facing musicians is that we've lost one of our major sources of validation, which would be performing in front of a live audience. It's kind of difficult to explain the feeling if you're not a performer who gets up on stage all the time, but it's an incredible feeling getting to perform, doing the thing you love in front of people, and seeing that it's appreciated. There's no replacement for that. I'm extremely lucky that I am able to do Harmony with Hunter, that I'm able to put out these videos, that people are supportive, that people watch them, that people actually subscribe to my Patreon and my channel. Like, I'm incredibly grateful for that. And that's been a huge source of comfort for me. But at the same time, it's still not the same. This was always supposed to be a live project. This was supposed to be performed in front of an audience in a venue, and I can't do that. I'd mentioned earlier the personal experience that led me to make this video, so I just wanted to tell you about it. So about 6 weeks or so ago, I started therapy. My fiance Meg had been urging me to look into therapists, and I finally took the leap. Found a therapist, luckily, and things were going pretty well. It was really nice to have that objective third party, somebody who could listen to my issues and give me feedback. And this past weekend, we started getting a bit more in depth. We started talking a bit more about the nitty-gritty, about what was really bothering me, he asked me if he could give me a quiz about mental health. I agreed, and we took the quiz, and he tallied up my results, and he asked me, how do you think you did on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 scoring for mild depression and 5 scoring for severe depression. I remembered taking a very similar quiz when I was younger, and I had scored a 1 for mild depression, and I figured with COVID that'd probably bump me up a couple notches, so I guessed 3. He shook his head, said nope. I was like, oh, 4, really? He shook his head again. I scored a 5 for severe depression. Yeah, so that was difficult to wrap my head around. I knew on some level that things were bad, but I had been, at least until then, unwilling to admit how serious the depression had gotten. I consider myself like a somewhat enlightened human, like relatively in touch with my emotions. I write songs about my feelings and cry at Pixar movies. But clearly, part of me still bought into, and probably still buys into, the idea of mental health and depression, being a sign of weakness, being something that you don't admit to, at least not publicly. And that's a huge problem, because if you don't know what the problem is, how are you supposed to fix it? Now, the thing is, objectively speaking, I'm in a pretty fortunate situation. I'm actually relatively financially stable. I have an amazing, supportive fiance, adorable pets, a loving family, and I have harmony with Hunter. I have a way to create music still, which is immensely helpful for me. The problem is there's a lot of people out there, a lot of musicians and artists who don't have those things. And that's really concerning to me. That's really worrying to me. We may only actually be at the halfway point of the pandemic. God, that's a horrible thing to say. I'm hopeful that vaccinations will move quicker and that maybe Broadway will be able to reopen in the fall. But that's still a long ways away. And I'm concerned that if we don't talk about this more openly, then we're going to have some serious problems. I know for me personally, just, actually being able to admit it, being able to admit to the severity of the problem and having a name for the problem has made me hopeful, even in just the week since my last session, because I feel like now at least I know what I'm dealing with, and I can start to proactively, work on it. I'm not saying that everyone should necessarily go out and find a therapist. That's not always an option for everyone, and what's working for me might not necessarily work for you. But I do think at the very least we need to start having conversations about this. We need to start talking about removing the stigma around mental health, and we need to support each other as we do. I'm not an expert by any means, but if you are experiencing any of the following symptoms, if you're moving or talking more slowly than usual, difficulty falling asleep, inability to focus, suicidal thoughts, or difficulty enjoying things that you used to enjoy, these can all be indicators of severe depression. And I would really recommend that you reach out if you can. Doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be a friend. It could be a family member. It could be anyone. It could be me. I got free time. Reach out. I know it can be difficult to ask for help, and it can be difficult to admit to there being a problem, but there's nothing to be ashamed of. We're living in insane, extraordinary, incredibly challenging times, and everyone can use a little bit of help sometimes. So please do consider reaching out. If cost is a stumbling block for you, if this is one of the reasons that you've been avoiding therapy like I used to, check your insurance. I was surprised to find that my health insurance actually covered therapy, which was very, very helpful. But I'll also put some resources in the description below for more affordable therapy. Friends, family, fans of musicians, check in on your on your musician friends. Check in on them. Check in on your actor, performer, writer friends too. You know, make sure that they're doing okay, and let them know what their art means to you. You know, or what it's meant to you in the past. If you can, like, help them monetarily, buying their albums, buying their books, their plays, their videos, whatever, you know, whatever you can. That's obviously super helpful right now. Or at least, you know, support them with words of encouragement and like try to give them some of that validation that we're all sort of lacking these days. A couple of weeks ago, I got a text from a friend telling me how much he loved my videos, and it completely turned my day around. It made a huge difference for me. So things like that can really go a long way. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This was a tough one. This was tough to film and to think about. But I think it's important just to sort of get it out there and to hopefully get some discussions going. If you have stories or thoughts or concerns of your own, please do let me know in the comments below. Take care of each other out there. See you guys next week.